Mr. Frazier, do you reside here in Dallas?
Yes.
Directing your attention way back to October of 1963, were you employed at the Texas School Book Depository Building located at the corner of Elm and Houston Streets in Dallas?
Yes, sir.
What type of work did you do there?
Order filler.
Order filler of books?
Yes, sir.
In mid-October of that year, 1963, did a man named Lee Harvey Oswald start to work at the Book Depository Building?
Yes, sir.
And did you learn that Mr. Oswald's Russian-born wife, Marina, was living with a lady named Ruth Payne about half a block from where you lived at 2515 West 5th Street?
Yes, sir.
Did you learn from Mr. Oswald that he was living by himself in Dallas?
Yes, sir, I did.
At the beginning of Mr. Oswald's employment at the Book Depository Building in mid-October of 1963, did he ask you if you would drive him to his wife's home in Irving on Friday evenings after work and return with you on Monday mornings?
Yes, sir, he did.
And you agreed to do this?
Yes.
Driving to and from work, would you and Mr. Oswald talk a lot?
No, sir, he didn't talk very much.
Okay. What about at work? Would you see him talk to fellow workers, or would he be pretty much to himself?
He stayed pretty much to himself. He was a loner.
Okay. Now, Mr. Frazier, was there one time that Mr. Oswald asked you to drive him back to Irving that was not on a Friday?
Yes, sir, he did.
Was that on November the 21st, 1963, a Thursday?
Yes, sir.
The day before President Kennedy was assassinated?
Yes, sir.
And what did you say to him?
He asked me, could he ride home? And I said, sure, you can ride home with me anytime. And then I thought, and I said, well, why do you want to go home with me tonight? And he told me that he was going home to get some curtain rods for his apartment from Miss Payne.
Okay, so that evening after work, you brought Mr. Oswald back to Irving, is that correct?
That's correct.
The following morning, Friday, November the 22nd, 1963, did anything unusual happen while you were eating breakfast?
Yes, sir, it did. Lee looked, had come down to my home, and he looked in the kitchen window.
Okay, he hadn't done that before?
No, sir.
Eventually, you and he got into your car?
Yes, sir.
When you got into the car, did you notice that he'd put something in the back seat?
Yes, sir. As I was getting in the car, I noticed a package on the back seat.
Did you ask him what it was, and if so, what did he say?
Yes, sir, I did ask him, and he says, you know, that's the curtain rods that I was going to pick up from Miss Payne.
Okay. Once you arrived at the Book Depository Building that morning, where did you park your car?
In the employee parking lot.
As I understand it, when the two of you got out of the car, he started walking ahead of you to the entrance of the building. Is that correct?
That is correct.
As he was walking ahead of you, was he carrying the bag that had been on the back seat?
Yes, sir.
Did you recall how he was carrying the bag?
Yes, sir. He was carrying it parallel to his body.
Okay, so he carried the bag right next to his body on the right side?
Yes, sir, on the right side.
Was it cupped in his hand and under his armpit? I think you've said that in the past.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Frazier, is it true that you paid hardly any attention to this bag?
That is true.
So the bag could have been protruding out in front of his body and you wouldn't have been able to see it. Is that correct?
That is true.
Mr. Frazier, I understand you watched the presidential motorcade from outside the front door of the Book Depository Building. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you heard the rifle shots?
Yes, sir.
How many did you hear?
3.
After the shooting that afternoon, was there a roll call of employees to see if all the employees had returned to the building?
Yes, sir, there was.
Were all employees present at the time of the roll call, or was anyone missing?
Everyone was present except Mr. Oswald.
He was the only employee who was missing. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you, Mr. Frazier. No further questions.
Tell us your name.
Harold Norman,
Where do you live, Mr. Norman?
Dallas, Texas.
Thank you.
Mr. Norman, in November of 1963, were you working as an order filler for
Yes.
school books at the Texas School Book Depository Building?
Yes, sir.
And one of your co-workers was Lee Harvey Oswald. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, sir.
Did you become acquainted or friendly with Mr. Oswald at work, Mr. Norman?
No, sir.
Is there a reason for that?
We didn't have any conversations at all. So
He was kind of a loner?
loner.
On Friday morning, November the 22nd, 1963, the day President Kennedy was assassinated, did you see the presidential motorcade that day?
Yes, sir.
Where did you watch it from?
From the 5th floor.
Did you watch the motorcade with any co-workers?
Yes, sir.
And what are their names?
James Jorman, which is known as Junior, and Bonnie Ray Williams.
Exhibit D. Mr. Norman, on your left is a photograph of 4 windows, 3 of which are open, and as you can see, there are 2 men in the bottom windows. Do you recognize who is shown in this photograph?
Yes, sir.
And who is shown?
This is Bonnie Ray Williams, and that is myself, Harold Norman.
So you were in the southeasternmost window of the 5th floor of the Book Depository Building.
Yes, sir.
And then eventually the presidential motorcade passed by. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
What did you see and hear at that time, Mr. Norman?
Well, I heard a shot, when the motorcade came by. The first shot seemed like the president slumped. Then I heard 2 more shots.
So you heard a total of 3 shots?
Yes, sir.
Did it sound to you like a rifle was being fired directly above you?
Yes, sir.
Was there any other reason, in addition to the sound of the rifle, any other reason why you believe the shots were coming from directly above you?
Yes, sir.
What is that?
Because I could hear the empty hulls, that's what I call them, hit the floor, and I could hear the bolt action of the rifle being pushed back and forward.
You're familiar with a bolt-action rifle?
Yes, sir.
Now, by hulls, you mean cartridge casings?
Cartridge.
How many did you hear falling to the floor?
3.
Is the sound of that bolt action and the ejection of the cartridge casings and their falling to the floor something that you're going to remember for the rest of your life?
Yes, sir.
Tell us your name.
Eugene Boone,
Where you live, Mr. Boone?
Abilene, Texas.
In 1963, Mr. Boone, were you a deputy sheriff of the county of Dallas?
Yes, sir, I
And
was.
at approximately 12:30 p.m. on the date November the 22nd, 1963, the day of the assassination, do you recall where you were?
Yes, sir.
And where was that?
In front of the sheriff's office at 505 Main Street.
Did you hear any shots around that time?
Yes, sir, I did.
Would you please show the jury where you were at the time you heard the shots, where you ran to, and what you did when you arrived at that area?
Generally, I was in this area right here. I ran down Main Street and around this cement works across this grassy area here, and then eventually over this the fence and the cement wall abutment here into the freight yards.
This is the famous grassy knoll area right here.
Yes, sir.
Can the jury see this? There we go. Did you find any evidence at all of a gunman having been in that area right there?
No, sir.
I'm talking about the grassy knoll area and the railroad yard area behind the grassy knoll area.
No, sir. As I recall, there were cars parked in this area right here. This area here, there was a flower bed in this area here. I did examine the flower bed and the foliage in this area and down this area here, and could see no footprints in the flower beds that had recently been turned, or was there any indication of any powder burns, anything like that on any of the foliage that we could see.
Okay, you may resume the witness stand. After you searched the area about which you've just been testifying to, Mr. Boone, I understand you went to the 6th floor of the book depository building and searched that floor with other law enforcement officers. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Exhibit number 11. Now on the screen is a photograph, Mr. Boone, of stacks of cartons or boxes near a window. Do you recognize what is depicted in this photograph?
The boxes on the inside of the southeast building, the southeast floor of the 6th floor of the school book depository, southeast corner.
When you arrived on the 6th floor, is this the way the cartons were stacked around that window?
Yes, sir.
So you could almost say there was a sniper's nest around that window.
Yes, sir.
You may proceed, Mr. Williams.
What do those cartons and boxes look like to you?
It looked like an attempt to hide something on the other side.
If someone had been walking on that 6th floor and someone was behind those boxes, could the person behind the boxes have been seen?
They would be concealed from either the elevator or the stairwell across the building.
Exhibit 12. Next on the screen is another photograph. Do you recognize what is depicted in this photograph?
Yes, sir. It's the area between the row of boxes on the previous exhibit and the window. Looks like a place where a rifle could rest.
Those boxes look like a gun rest.
Yes, sir, as I remember them.
Did you eventually spot a rifle on the 6th floor, Mr. Boone?
Yes, sir, I did.
Exhibit 14. Do you recognize what is depicted in this photograph?
Yes, sir. The rifle.
The rifle that you saw on the 6th floor.
Yes, sir.
Is that the way the rifle looked when you found it?
Yes, sir.
When you first looked at the weapon, Mr. Boone, did you mistakenly take it for a 7.65 millimeter Mauser?
Yes, sir.
And why did you think it was a Mauser?
Well, Mauser basically refers to the bolt action, and there were a lot of military weapons around at that point in time.
Is Mauser kind of a generic term for a bolt-action rifle?
Yes, sir.
You are not an expert on firearms.
I am not.
Thank you, Mr. Boone. No further questions.